Our second case study is going to be on Jeffrey Dahmer, and he was referred to as the Milwaukee Monster. Dahmer was active between the years 1978 and 1991. He's known to have killed 17 young men, 14 of which were minorities of varying ethnicities. There could have been more, although he insisted there probably wasn't. Some different charges that Dahmer had been charged with during this time was first-degree murder, indecent exposure, child molestation, disorderly conduct, and public intoxication. His victims ranged from the age of 14 to 32, and they were all males. Dahmer was convicted of all charges, including 15 first-degree murder charges. He was sentenced to 16 consecutive life terms with no possibility of parole. He was convicted in the state of Wisconsin, and Wisconsin had no death penalty. It still doesn't as of this day. And you can see from the map here, there are several states that do not have a death penalty. In terms of a forensic official diagnosis, he was diagnosed with borderline personality disorder, schizotypical personality disorder, as well as a general psychotic disorders. And from our review, from our intro lecture notes, a borderline personality disorder is a long-term pattern of multiple traits and behaviors, unstable relationship with others, unstable sense of self, and unstable emotions. One of the things you'll be doing is viewing a documentary on Dahmer. Can you find evidence that would support this diagnosis? So one of the things about personality disorders, as we talked about earlier, and you can see in this graphic, is they have the fear of abandonment. They do not form very good relationships. They can be very impulsive, emotionally unstable, suicidal tendencies, their inability to regulate emotions. They tend to dissociate from reality, and their self-image is somewhat distorted. In the schizotypical personality disorder, this is characterized by a number of different criteria. They tend to have very severe social anxiety. They exhibit paranoid delusions. People are out to get me. They have thought disorders. Thought disorders are their thinking just doesn't jive with the rest of the population. Derealization, that means that reality is slightly skewed or distorted completely. And of course, they have these crazy beliefs, the unconventional beliefs. You can see from the graphic here, it also illustrates other characteristics. In terms of Dahmer's first murder that he committed, it was 3 weeks after his high school graduation. His parents were undergoing a divorce, some background information there. He was essentially abandoned since he had turned 18. He was left totally alone in the house. That shows the social isolation. His first victim was Stephen Mark Hicks. He was the same age. He was a hitchhiker that he picked up. He convinced him to come to his house and have some drinks, very typical teenage behavior. When Hicks tried to leave, Dahmer didn't want him to, and he ended up bludgeoning him in the head with a 10-pound dumbbell. And then he strangled him to death while he was unconscious. So he knocked him out and then strangled him. The next day, autopsy was in his basement. He buried the remains of the victim in his backyard. And then weeks later, he exhumed the remains to match flesh with bone. Flesh discovered in acid and flushed away. The bone was crushed into powder by a sledgehammer and scattered in the woods. So he went to some lengths to try to disguise and get rid of his victim's remains. Not a normal situation here. Some other background information, he was served in the military. He tried to enroll in a post-high school school, but it didn't work. When he did serve in the military, he was stationed in Germany, and at that time he was also accused of trying to rape somebody while in Germany. In 1991, he tried to convince 3 men to come and drink with him and pose for pictures. One of them chose to do so, and then we have this interesting kind of scenario